Hello and welcome to another JUXTcast. On the JUXTcast today, we have Renzo. Hello,
Yeah.
Renzo.
Hey, hi, Malcolm.
John,
Hello.
Jeremy, and Joe. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
And me, Malcolm. Today, we're talking about Strange Loop 2022, September. We sponsored Strange Loop this year, John. Why did we decide to do that?
Well, it's an awesome conference for a start. It's where the Simple Made Easy talk by Richard Key was filmed. And it's a great conference where there's a real smattering of different themes and topics, I guess, and different things to learn. Many of us in JUXT are quite keen to go there and to have that experience and to learn. So we wanted to sponsor it. We want to go out there. We want to meet some people. We want to talk about the learnings that we've been having and share some and just open ourselves up and to go there and to partake in this experience.
So to get ourselves in the mood for Strange Loop, we're going to go through the board, we'll go through the agenda and pick out things that we're really excited about going to. Now, Thursday, September 22nd is when it starts and there is a workshop. In fact, there's one on Wednesday, the TLA Plus workshop, and I think Jeremy might be excited about that.
Yeah, sadly, I don't have a ticket for that one, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Hilal's materials on all kinds of things like Alloy and TLA Plus. Maybe next year.
Can you just let us know what TLA Plus is, Jeremy?
Yeah. So it's a specification language, like companies like Amazon or AWS use it to validate that their big distributed systems and consensus algorithms and things are behaving as they expect. So the idea is you sort of spec out your code in this like algebraic language. So it's a bit like a pseudocode that's executable and verifiable. And it just gives you that sort of confidence that what you're building is correct. And there's the actual TLA is like it's a temporal logic algebra thing. It can understand state transitions and clever stuff. I've never actually gotten to grips with it, so maybe it would have been a great idea for me to go to this workshop. But certainly I've got a lot of other things. You may notice I'm on the lineup for Thursday. So I'm running a session on Thursday, a workshop on bitemporal data management, which is something that's obviously very core to what we're doing at JUXT and in XTDB. So that's my little pitch for that. Yeah.
You're plugging your own talk there.
Outrageous. Like we didn't even ask him to. He just went straight in his own words. Why should anyone care about this talk, Jeremy, and what would they potentially learn from it?
Yeah, so bitemporality is a concept that you probably wouldn't have heard of unless you worked in a finance or insurance industry, but you'd recognize the concepts if you've worked in any system which has like soft deletes or the ability to roll back or schedule events for the future, because it's all about how you model time in a relational database. And so what we've done with XTDB is to try and bring these bitemporal concepts and make them first class in the database. So you don't have to implement it in your schema. It's a native part of the SQL spec or the query language spec. So what we've been doing with XT recently is actually implementing the SQL 2011 specification, which added these temporal operators. But basically no real implementations exist that do it comprehensively. Like MariaDB has added some of them, DB2 again, but like Postgres doesn't implement these features. So really the workshop is about, let's see what's possible across these different systems, understand the limitations, and also the benefits of doing this modeling, working with the database rather than having to do it all ad hoc in your own schema. So yeah, the purpose of the workshop really is to educate people on how I understand the space and the set of tools that are out there for solving these problems. And I think these problems are perennial. They exist across all industries. And as time marches on, I think more and more systems will build with this in mind as storage requirements become less of a constraint on the amount of data we store in our systems.
Okay, so you've arrived at Strange Loop, Joe. You've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning because you're jet lagged. And you've had breakfast and you've been for your run and you've hung on to 9:30. Which of these? I think we've got a choice now of 6 events. Now we've got a TLA Plus conference running throughout Thursday and a PWL conference running throughout Thursday. So we've got 4 bespoke talks. We've got Data Modeling for Developers by Alexis McKenzie and Susan King. Introduction to P5JS by Kate Hollenbach. Writing a mobile app with Clojure Dart with Christophe Grand and Baptiste Dupuch. And Building a Block Protocol Block. Kieran and Jude all read. Which one stands out for you, Joe?
So I think initially the data modeling for developers is an exercise that is, and anyone that's been in the role of an engineer for very long knows that this is something that they can never really definitively get right. And it's a topic that we'll all return to in so many different ways. So that data modeling for developers, I'm really interested in new takes on that as an idea. But I think probably of that lineup, I'll be heading to visit Christophe and Baptiste on the Clojure Dart, because I just find it so interesting, the idea that Clojure as a language now that's been around for maybe 15, getting on for 15 years. And I just think seeing the work that's going on to bring closure into new runtimes, into new areas where we may have had a solution for kind of writing Android apps in Clojure in the past, but it's really interesting that we're now getting really fantastic kind of native experiences in these areas. And things like Babashka and things like MBB are in this realm as well of still bringing Clojure to new places. So I just think that, you know, Clojure Dart, in terms of projects, it has some way to go until it's complete. But I just think that the idea of writing a real fantastic experience for writing Android apps in Clojure is just very exciting.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that, actually. I mean, the data modeling, I think, is very interesting for me. I noticed the other day that SQL is now the #2 language. You know, SQL has grown and grown. It's now at #2 in terms of job listings and things like that. It's had a massive renaissance. And I think we know why that is. Definitely 10 years ago or 20 years ago, ORMs and application servers and sort of hiding the database was the order of today. But SQL has really made a really kind of come back with a vengeance. So data modeling, therefore, is a key thing for people to learn. So you know, we would definitely recommend those talks.
I think
maybe a word on the PWL Conf that is close to my heart. I used to organize the meetups here in London for the PWL. This is the Papers We Love meetups. So it's a conference that aggregates, it's between engineering and research, and usually is a little bit more on the research side, because people who are attending and people who are presenting on computer science papers. They might be the author of the paper, but they might not be, and they might just explain in simple English, perhaps, what the content of the paper is about. And sometimes these papers are very interesting. They give you ideas, they give you different views about how to deal with a specific problem. So yes, I just wanted to maybe put a word out there about what's going on at PWL. And yeah, Telman, that many of us might know in the Clojure world, is also presenting, and is presenting about his work at Microsoft.
Cool.
Okay, so moving on to the lunchtime slot. So the PW conference continues. We have Jeremy's bitemporal data talk. Obviously, we're all going to be going to support Jeremy, but in a parallel universe, which other talks would we go to? Jeremy, I think that's one for you.
Well, I'm always curious about what browser tools people are cooking up. And I think using a browser every day, and I think the ability to customize our experience using the web is just generally, people don't spend enough time thinking about it. I'm sick to death of having too many tabs open and not having it integrated with my knowledge management system. Yeah, I haven't actually studied the actual purpose of this talk, but certainly that title drew me in immediately. And I was using Book Dude's small Clojure interpreter the other day. So Sai, he has wrapped it in this thing called Sittle or Skittle, and it allows you to write Clojure very quickly in a browser context. So you could potentially very quickly write browser extensions in Clojure. Yeah, I don't think that talk is about Clojure, but I'm sure it'll give you some ideas.
Okay, so no, that looks like a very interesting afternoon. Let's move on quickly to the afternoon. John, anything grab you?
So the moldable live programming with Clerk. This is kind of Clojure related, so it immediately pulls me towards it. But I'm interested to know what Clerk is. I haven't really heard of it before, so it sounds like a deep dive. Interested to hear from Martin and Jack there on that. So yeah.
I think this is one I might not go to, not just because of Jeremy, but because I went to this as a Clojure D. They did a little breakout sessions where we could get hands-on experience with Clerk, and really, really enjoyed it. It's very, very interesting. So yeah, definitely recommend going and hearing what they have to say. I'm also interested in the GraphQL TypeScript schema packages for rapid development. That sounds fun, and I'm sure it's the sort of thing that me and Alex are really into. Anything GraphQL and schema is something that floats my boat. So moving on to the evening. Any plans for the evening, Renzo?
The Strange Loop Party.
Really, I was going to pick that too.
Yeah, you know, I've been twice to this party, and yeah, I can suggest everyone to go to the City Museum. It's a one-off experience in your life, and you definitely have to go. Please use long trousers. Don't go in shorts, because you're going to regret that when you're going to these huge slides that are going throughout the buildings and the floors. So that's like a pro trick right there. And the other thing is, I noticed on the website that I went for the first time that there are many other rooms and floors that I never seen. So I hope this year maybe they keep it completely open. It's still like a large range of experiences, but I hope I can see also the things that I've seen on the website.
You've been as well, John, haven't you?
Yeah, I love the museum. I think it's so much fun. I think the slides are fun, but I like the kind of tubes, like the wire mesh tubes outside that you have to crawl through. And that's in the open air as well. So it's a good tip to wear trousers because your knees can suffer some damage, but it is just so much fun. And I love the kind of basement area, which is like some haunted sort of concrete dungeon thing where you can get trapped in between the crevices. And occasionally you can run into somebody in some random tube that's hanging on the underside of a ceiling and just have a conversation with someone like, hey, what are you doing here? I'm a bit tired. I really have to sit down for a bit. And then you get some irreverent conversations. So it's a huge amount of fun. I
You
think.
get back to your hotel at 2 a.m. and then the next day you wake up this time at 6 a.m., go down for breakfast, do your run, get to the conference, and 9:30 is the keynote. So this must be one that everybody would go to. Expert software developers approach to error. Should we take a look at that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is by Marion Petra from the Center of Research and Computing, the Open University. Is that our Open University? Is that the Open University in the city of the future, Milton Keynes?
Yes, it is. So she's from the Center for Research in Computing, the Open University, Walton Hall in Milton Keynes.
We'll definitely have to all turn up and support Marion there.
Wear some Milton Keynes t-shirts and things. It's,
Absolutely. Then fourth coffee of the morning, and we turn up at 10:50. Jeremy, we've got It Will Never Work in Theory, Beyond Blockchain, Fight AI Bias with Bias, Monad I Love You Now, Get Out My Time System, Demystifying Privacy Preserving Computing, an IPC language for the whole operating system. Which one of those, just by the title, would you turn up to?
Jeremy, I just noticed that the Monad I Love You Now Get Out My Type System says this is talks about a bitemporal data store. So it feels like right up your street potentially. Distribution, dependency tracking, caching. These are some of the core features our platform provides.
Well, yeah, okay, that is news to me. Interesting. Maybe we should sync before we talk over each other or something. But yeah, no, that's a good connection. I was about to say Mike Anderson's talk would be the one I gravitate to because I recognize the name, and he's definitely going to be talking about his blockchain closure-inspired Lisp thing, which is called Convex, and he's been working on it for a while, and we've spoken a few times over the last year or two, and I think it's a really cool project. Like, of all the sort of blockchainy systems that I've looked at in the last few years, it's one of the most tangible and attractive. If I was going to go and build my fortunes in that blockchain space, that might be the thing I bet on.
Worth noticing that this It Will Never Work in Theory is another mini conference in the conference, and it's lightning talks. Again, researchers or more research oriented. And in this case, the theme is about bugs in software, how to automatically find them, how to automatically fix them.
It's a bit like a kind of Inception, where you go for one and you get a whole conference within one little slot, and then you come out and you go to the main conference. So we're now in the second main choice. So I think we'll go Renzo. You've got It Will Never Work in Theory, again, local first key agreement with hierarchical hashing, level up your machine learning lifecycle with innovative modularized approach, polymorphism unbound, Bruce Echo, what we learned dissecting the world's most popular containers, and how live music is evolving in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, picking by author because Bruce Eckle brings back memories when I started developing and reading Thinking in Java, which was one of the books I was free, I think. That's why it was very popular. So I never saw him speaking. The topic is interesting also for functional programmers. Polymorphism is still part of it. So I would probably pick that one in this case.
Very good. Yeah, I remember, I think the Java Posse, if you remember that, a long time ago, a very, very early Java podcast. But anyway, he co-founded the Java Posse Roundup conference, which I remember fondly. So we've had lunch, we've come back. I think, Joe, which one of these would you think you would go to? Machine learning for developer productivity? Is that about Copilot? That's got to be Copilot, hasn't it? Anyway, workflows, a new abstraction for distributed systems with Dominic Tor now. Disaster recovery options running Apache Kafka in Kubernetes. I know you're a bit of a Kafka person. How to avoid hazards when using closures in Scala. CalDB, a cloud-native log search platform, another database there, and introducing the Handax collection patterns language.
This is John here. Yeah, I'd be interested in CalDB because it's a Lucene-based sort of log store that you can query, a bit like Elasticsearch, but they've had some problems with Elasticsearch. So they go to a scale of petabytes of logs per week, which is an awful lot. So these guys have really pushed out the limits of Elastic. And then they're also talking about things like ingestion failures due to field conflicts. And when you've got a lot of Elasticsearch clusters, then it's operationally complex to manage them. I've seen this up front when you've got things like Zookeeper and Split Brains. So I'd be quite interested, like it's a few years on since I made use of Elastic. So someone's doing something different, it's more scalable. After years of reflection on the use of Elastic, they're looking at some of the issues and they've got something fresh and new. So I'd like to learn more. And also the architecture, what they're talking about, the aggregator leaf tailor architecture enables first-class support for Kubernetes. Sounds interesting. I want to know what it's about.
Yeah, I think the speaker, Suman, is very well qualified. He's the tech lead of Zipkin and co-author of the Open Tracing Standard from the Linux Foundation, which I think it's a lovely standard. So
he's a senior software engineer at Slack now, so presumably this is the technology that powers the search behind Slack, one could infer, which would be very interesting.
yeah, the L of Slack actually is log. No, yeah.
All right, what's the S and the N and the C and the K?
Searchable log of all company knowledge.
Nice.
Okay, so Joe, it really is your turn. This is 2:30 on the Friday. Remember when we broke the internet? Resilient microservices without the chaos, avoiding the pitfalls of auto-scaling with constant work, symbolic numeric programming in Julia, data-driven investigation in defense of human rights, and all about regular expressions, which is a wonderful title because it's written in a regular expression syntax.
I think it's hard to resist. I would have to go for the regular expression talk because, who amongst us does not love regular expressions? They can be the most elegant solutions to so many different problems and obviously widely used, widely abused. And it's often fascinating getting into a bit of a deeper dive into regex. And I'm not sure whether this is about text-based regex or regular expressions more generally, as we see in things like spec. But I actually think that regex, I'm not one of these people that sort of hates on regex. I think it's such a powerful technology. And I guess I would choose that talk. Probably have my mind blown during it, I should imagine.
Yeah, I would echo that thought for most of my career that regular expressions were for Perl hackers and they weren't for, real engineers. But since I think a couple of years ago, we really went deep into trying to understand regular expressions and negative look ahead and look behind and all that kind of stuff, and found it fascinating. And I find them a wonderful mini language like SQL and things. It's a wonderful thing to have in your code arsenal, and I think they work really well. They're particularly fast as well. We've measured how fast regular expressions can be because they're so old and they've been optimized, and I'm sure there's been hundreds if not thousands of papers written about every edge of regular expressions, so they're a real gem in our toolbox. Okay, we got 2 more to do and then we're into the Friday night board game night. So we have Programmable Inc. Don't get owned by your dependencies, how Firefox sandboxes its libraries, and you can too. Light and adaptive indexing for immutable databases. Cogen with types for humans by humans. Reviving 1990s digital dress-up dolls with Smooch, and blueprints for a universal reasoning machine. I think we'll give this one to John. There's one that sort of caught my eye there, John. Who's this Håkan Råberg?
He's the one that's researched the area. I was like, I'd love to see you give this talk, because when I've looked at the work that he's been doing, to have a index that goes across immutable data that takes account of time, it needs to be a multi-dimensional index, right? So you can search for a particular attribute, a particular value at this particular, well, between this time range for the immutable timeline and between this time range for the business timeline. So hence it's a 6-dimensional index that you might have to grapple with. And that's already a very hard and interesting problem, of course. But then if you think, well, what are the different types of indexing that you might have to come up against? If you're a database, you've got data that's flying in, right? So you've got like a mutable layer, right, of like the index that's been updated. So you might have to have an index that's dealing with live data coming in that has to be incredibly fast to search, but can cope with these updates coming in. And then you've got a couple of layers below that, and one might be ingesting big kind of chunks of immutable data and then building that into a new sort of index chunk that you can put into an object store so a subsequent node can get hold of it and save themselves the work. So I think this is deeply fascinating. There's many different approaches to this. There's many different types of algorithms to handle this multidimensional data.
We had a little bit of a preview of seeing what Hawken is posting early versions of his slide decks to our Slack, and particularly the attention to things like the typography of his slides is typical Hawken, and he never gives a bad talk.
He actually gives an entertaining talk as well. It's going to be great.
Okay, so just almost at the end of Friday, we have one more talk, the early days of ID software programming principles with John Romero. Wow, what a rock star. John Romero, of course, co-founder of id Software with John Carmack. Heroes to anyone who grew up playing Doom and Quake, and Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which is my particular favorite. Jeremy, you're a bit of a gamer. What are you going to go to that talk?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, this is probably the biggest reason I was excited for Strangely. I saw this.
Yes.
I absolutely. I mean, the stars are aligning. So no, I'm really hyped for this.
Wonderful. Okay, well,
I guess he's not there, but I think John Carmack has, written a lot about the benefits of functional programming and really tried to bring functional programming to the world of gaming. Obviously, building games is a way of easily getting yourself into just a nightmare of mutable state everywhere. And I think, obviously, this is John Romero rather than John Carmack giving this talk, but it's interesting that there is quite a strong connection to the topics that are closely associated with Strange Loop and John Carmack and id.
I think it's interesting that the talk is called Programming Principles, because of the two, I wouldn't have thought that John Romero would have given the talk on programming principles. I thought he was more the storyteller of the two. So that I think in itself is interesting. But yes, which other talks are particularly interesting?
Blueprints for a universal reasoning machine. How can that not be deeply fascinating? So yeah, what's this one about? So this is a long-standing objective of AI research has been to discover theories of general human-like reasoning. So it's going to be, a deep dive into AI reasoning machines, which sounds absolutely fascinating.
It's good. I'm quite interested in the programmable ink as owner of a remarkable tablet.
Yeah, so this guy, Shimon, is from the same research lab that Martin Kleppman's working at, so Ink and Switch, where they're looking at all kinds of things like CRDT, data structures, and other sort of human-computer interface designs. So yeah, this sounds really interesting to me.
They have some really cool blogs, don't they, Ink and Switch, that just look really nice. Okay, so we finished. Are we going to the board game night? I think so.
Yeah. I would say one thing I enjoy about Strangely as well is that you tend to get people splintering off and groups forming and people going for random sort of meals into random parts of St. Louis and taxi journeys. I think that's one of my most favorite parts. Just you never quite know where you're going to end up. Who's going where, what sort of dinner you'll have, what sort of crowd you'll mix in, what sort of place you'll end up in finally. So I'm sure the board game night is going to be great as well. But I just enjoy just getting out there and meeting people. So as part of the thrill, just this big sort of conference, just going around St. Louis and seeing what's what.
Yeah, I have to say I'm looking forward to it. Just like going all the way out to America on a flight, and I'm fascinated with history and the fact that you're going to a historical city that hosted the World Fair in 1904 and the Olympics, and it was a Milton Keynes of its day, actually. And just to go out there and explore a historic city in America, so I've never even been to Missouri, so to go to St. Louis will be a real treat. So I don't know whether I'll go to this one. I might want to just see how the conference takes me.
Sort of roam about a bit.
So we've now truly over our jet lag. We're up at 7 a.m. We've had our breakfast. We've done our running, and it's nice. Sun is shining, and it's 9:30. We have leveraging AI for global health. Ben Shai's AI, a data-centric machine learning platform, which I'm sure we'll all go to. That, yeah, when you see all of the developments, we've seen all the kind of things this year about AI in art. Okay, quite exciting to see AI in health.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You can probably tell from some of the talks that we already went through that there is maybe an implicit theme this year in Strange Loop. It looks there are many AI and machine learning talks. Maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like a few already.
Does anyone else think that it's like this year is when the future's actually arrived? Like DALL-E and all these AI tools to build out this wonderful art. And what's that thing called, the bot that generates you that text, or the GPT?
Yeah, GPT-3.
3. It feels like we've had a bit of a gap where people are wondering, has it really landed? Is AI really going to deliver anything that's going to be truly groundbreaking? But this year, suddenly, or the last year, it's just been this avalanche of amazing things that are happening. So I take your theme, what you're suggesting there, Renzo, and broaden it out. It feels like this is the year, this is the epoch where AI is really coming in and changing things.
Yeah, obviously, I mentioned this on the Slack, but for me, the quote that technology at any degree of sophistication is indistinguishable from magic. And I really got that sense of magic at the weekend when I was with my daughter in the shed and we were playing around with Stable Diffusion, which has just been launched it's about a week old. And we were playing with the image to image mode of Stable Diffusion. So this is where you can draw an image on a piece or upload an image, and you can get that to be used as the seed, and then you can ask the algorithm to return you an image based on your prompt. And so Tara was drawing little diagrams of stories and a little teddy bear, and we put it into the machine and asked it for a huggable teddy bear, and we got some really, really good results out. But trouble is, many of the times I got my GPU, got the error message, GPU CUDA out of memory, PyTorch, some sort of Python error. And so a lot of it was like juggling with little parameters to try and get the thing to work. But when we did get it working, boy, that was magic. Amazing stuff. And I think in a world where we're used to everything going on the cloud and away from us, to be able to download something and run it on your own computer again and have it be open source, I think that really impressed me.
It's interesting that I guess the name of the conference itself, of course, comes from a seminal AI book by Douglas Hofstadter. So I'm not actually sure if there's been a sort of prevalence of AI material at Strange Loop in the past. I've always associated it very much, obviously, with interesting tech, quite an association with functional programming. I'm not sure if there has been much AI content in the past, despite the fact that's where the name of the conference comes from, the sort of area, the field where the name comes from. So I guess maybe the interesting AI tech and the Strange Loop conference have now collided this year.
Yeah. Okay, so 10:50. Right, we're on the last day of the conference. So we have building observability for 99% developers with Gene Yang, powering Spotify's audio personalization platform, formally verifying everybody's cryptography, Haiti, a gradual programming language, and the education of a civic technologist. Wow, there's a lot of talks, a lot of depth there. Which one, Renzo, takes your fancy?
Yeah, it's a tough choice. I'm always interested by new programming language, gradual programming language. Yeah, I'm quite curious to know what it's about, why it should be featured at the conference. The second would probably be Spotify personalization platform, just to see the sheer scale that they're using to do this kind of personalizations. So I'm curious about this too, I think.
The formally verifying everybody's cryptography is a bold claim.
Yeah, I'm scared about the math. It shouldn't be, right? You should be brave, and maybe there is none. So,
so we go to 11:40. A commerce-centric approach to queuing fairly at high throughput. From bare metal to cloud native, the evolution of a planetary scale distributed database. Wow. Open sourcing Venice, time travel debugging JavaScript applications. There are no shortcuts in organizing, but technology sure does help. And Stop Writing Dead Programs by our friend Jack Rusher. Jeremy, which one do you think you'll be going to?
It's really tough. Some really interesting things there. Planetary scale database system mentioned is actually by New Relics. It's like an internal system, which I think is always the most interesting part of like where databases come from, is like understanding the context, like the specific business problems they were trying to solve. They couldn't find anything else off the shelf that worked. So for me, I think that's necessarily the best choice or most optimal choice. But yeah, Jack Rush's talks, all I've seen is very interesting. Presumably it's about, and he's been interested in like this modelable development and the sort of image-based development and having everything being interactive. Like I think that's also very important. The time travel debugging does mention retroactively changing the past as well. So there's like a bitemporal angle there, which would be fascinating. But yeah, I think the New Relic talk has it for me.
Well, thanks, Jeremy. Okay, so rattling through lunch. We're back after lunch. We've been fed. We've got Python performance matters, formal modeling and analysis of distributed systems, finding critical bugs early. If only I owned my own data, architecting decentralized data systems, of JavaScript ahead of time compilation performance, and MetaLens extending the Linux kernel with visual programming. I think I'm going to take this one. I'm really interested in data sovereignty. I love the idea of owning my own data and companies owning their own data. So I think I would be interested to go to Catherine's talk if I owned my own data. Anyone else got any alternatives?
My second choice will go to formal modeling and analysis of distributed systems. It looks like a TLA plus related. I'm not sure if it's TLA plus, but yeah, it's probably about formal verification.
Yeah, it doesn't mention Jepsen. So, well, I know Jepsen is more around running a distributed test suite, but this looks like it's complementary. Okay, next one for you, Joe. We have automatic generation of runtime checkers for production distributed systems. In the land of the sizing, the one partition Kafka topic is king. AVIF, creating a new image format in the open. A hipster history of cores. Diagrammer simply make interactive diagrams. And art you can make by spying on yourself with your phone.
There's a bunch of interesting ones there. I think AVIF is a pretty fascinating tech and quite mind-blowing when you see some of the results. But I think I'd probably have to choose land of the sizing, the one partition Kafka topic is king. I think anyone that's used Kafka or other large distributed sort of event-based or log systems knows that this question of how to maximize performance and how to deal with partitioning becomes, it's always a kind of a concern about how to partition your data where you need ordering guarantees, if you're going to split data across from many topics, even how you're going to maintain the ordering guarantees you need as data moves from one topic to another. I think the idea of this single partition topic is very attractive, of course, because it gives you an ordering guarantee across all of your data. But the questions then of how to process this data in a performant way come in. So I'm really interested. I think if I can learn something from this talk about new strategies for partitioning or some interesting takes here, then this can be quite a really interesting new fundamental tool in the toolbox when you come to some of these partitioning questions.
Thanks, Joe. Sadly, we're almost at the end of our conference. We have just the last choice to make here. So I think we'll leave this to Jeremy. A distributed file system for secure P2P applications. HODOR, great name there, HODOR, detecting and addressing overload in LinkedIn microservices. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory Legacy Survey of Space and Time. That might be one for you, John. LiveVue.js is the anti-SBA library for reactive app development in Node.js and Dino. Sniffing the metaverse and modern B-tree techniques.
Cool.
I think we can all have a stab at that. What's your favorite, Jeremy?
Yeah, I probably go for the LiveVue.js. I'm quite excited really about, and how I've personally in my own journey gone to the full 180 on, do I want single page applications or loads of logic on the front end, and live views from the Elixir ecosystem where they have this Phoenix live view thing. So I guess someone's made a port to JavaScript anyway, and bringing that concept of pushing as much UI logic back to the server because it's much easier to manage and scale in some ways and develop it. I guess developing is the biggest benefit, but I'm curious to see what that ecosystem looks like and what that fresh energy going into the front end looks like these days, because I've stepped away from it a little bit in the past couple of years. So that'd be my choice.
John, would you go to HODOR just because of the Game of Thrones reference?
It did link me to it. I mean, it's an amazing name. What does it stand for? Holistic Overload Detection and Overload Remediation. But anyway, I think this is quite fascinating. So this is the idea. There's lots and lots of microservices that have been deployed at this huge scale to power LinkedIn. And some microservices might have issues. They might go down. It could be some resource issue or something else. And so how do you allow that microservice to come back up, feeding it just enough traffic? I think it's quite a fascinating problem. I love imagining and looking into how these huge enterprises, these huge companies function terms of all these different services, whether they're micro or not. So I'm fascinated just to learn more and to get a feel for it. But of course, as a amateur astronomer, I'm interested in the legacy survey of space and time. My camera at home is 26 megapixels. This one is 3200. It's going to be very fascinating just to learn about how they operate this telescope, what the concerns are, but also, frankly, more interesting, what it is they're actually doing. Like, what are they studying, and what does it mean to survey space and time, looking into dark matter, trying to solve some mysteries. So it's going to be deeply fascinating. I think I'll go to that.
I want to know how much space does it take to save a single image?
Yes. Yeah. It's 50 megs for a 26 megapixel image. This is going to be...
Would you store that image on a distributed file system for secure P2P applications? I think it's a very interesting talk, and I think that the whole area of having control over privacy and encryption and who owns what data and being able to collaborate but securely, I think is a very interesting problem. And I'd like to, I don't know very much about this, but I'd like to go and see Brooklyn's talk. So I think I'll be going to that one. I think I'll be super tired at this point, as we all will be, but we've got one more talk to go to, which is the secure software supply chain. Who's going to be going to that, and who's going to be going to the bar?
They're not in competition, are they? So you can go to this. Yeah.
I think this is one of the problems of our age. You know, everything is, but we've got so much reuse. That was the sort of big theme of 20 years ago. Could we get everybody to reuse software and not keep writing it? Now we've got all this reuse, and we've got this huge vulnerability that some of the biggest breaches come through this software supply chain attack. And I think this is a huge problem we have to solve. So I definitely want to be going to this talk and listening to Kelsey Hightower. Okay, so we are all going to be at Strange Loop this year, and a few other people from JUXT. I think there's 11 of us going over. There may or may not be extra tickets available from JUXT. Keep an eye on our Twitter account.
So we are platinum sponsoring, which means there'll be a small crowd of us there. And really, we want people to come and talk to us, meet lots of people and have interesting conversations.
We have an amazing booth just in front of the dining area, so you cannot miss it.
You want some refreshments? We'll have some in the fridge.
Actually,
everyone from JUXT will be wearing a black t-shirt with the JUXT logo on it. So if you want to find somebody with a black t-shirt with a JUXT logo, then do. And I think that wraps it up. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm really super excited about going to the conference. I think we all are. And hopefully this preview has whet your appetite if you haven't got a ticket, and this encourages you to go and get one. I think it's going to be a fantastic conference. Wonderful to have a conference where everybody's back face to face, person to person, and like it always was. So I think we're all looking forward to the trip. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye, Renzo. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Goodbye, John.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the breakfast I always have there, which is I get these enormous waffles and pour on the strawberry and maple syrup and create a lovely big mush that I start every day with. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Goodbye, Jeremy.
Cool. See you soon. I'm really looking forward to coming back home and watching all the ones I missed on double speed. That's the best bit.
And goodbye, Joe.
Cheers, Malcolm. Thank you.
That's goodbye from me, Malcolm. See you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.